Hello everyone. Welcome back to the Checkered Sky channel where we dive into true crime cases. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because today we're stepping into a story that's as chilling as it is heartbreaking. It's a tale of a young woman chasing stardom, only to find herself caught in a web of darkness she never saw coming. This is the story of Heather Stigliano, a 19-year-old with everything ahead of her, until one November day in 1991, when it all came crashing down. Picture this. It's early November 1991. Myrtle Beach is winding down from its bustling summer season. The tourists are gone, the boardwalks are quiet, and the air carries that crisp hint of fall. Heather Stigliano had only been in town for a few months. After graduating from high school in rural New Jersey about a year ago, she packed up her belongings and moved here. Acting, singing, the bright lights of a stage, she wanted it all. She rented a little place near the beach, took a job slinging plates at a local restaurant, and told her mom she'd make it big. But something shifted. By November, her calls home grew quieter, sadder. She was homesick, maybe even a little lost. And then, silence. For a week, no one heard from Heather. Her friends got worried. Her mom, Susan, even more so. That last call, where Heather confessed things weren't going as planned, replayed in Susan's mind like a broken record. So, her friends did what friends do. They went to check on her. They knocked on the door of her apartment. No answer. Her car? Gone. But something told them to look closer. And when they did, what they found inside would turn this quiet beach town upside down. Heather Stigliano was dead. Her dreams of fame, her new life in Myrtle Beach, all of it snuffed out in an instant. Who took Heather's life and why? Let's find out. Before we can unravel the shadows that swallowed her dreams, we need to know who she was. A small-town girl with a big heart and even bigger ambitions. Heather Stigliano wasn't just a name in a case file. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a dreamer. Born in 1972 in Dover, New Jersey, Heather grew up in a close-knit family, surrounded by rolling hills and quiet streets. Her parents, Victor Stigliano and Susan Wright, raised her with love and support, alongside a younger brother and sister who looked up to her. Heather's childhood wasn't picture perfect. Her parents' divorce shook things up when she was still finding her footing, but it didn't dim her spirit. By the time she was a teenager, Heather had lived in a handful of places across New Jersey and Pennsylvania: Newton Ransom, Mount Arlington, Roxbury, each move shaping her into someone resilient, adaptable, and fiercely independent. She spent years at Abington Heights School in Pennsylvania, where teachers remembered her as bright and creative, before finishing high school at High Point Regional in Branchville, New Jersey. In 1990, she graduated with honors, a testament to her determination. But Heather wasn't content with just a diploma. She had a voice that could hush a crowd and a presence that begged for a spotlight. Friends described her as the life of the party, always laughing, always pulling people into her orbit with her warmth and energy. Victor, her dad, once said she loved anything with energy: music, theater, the buzz of a crowd. That's what drew her to Myrtle Beach, a place pulsing with life and possibility. Her mom, Susan, had just gone through a tough divorce, and Heather, loyal to a fault, stuck around for a year to help her regroup. They'd talk for hours about life, love, the future. Susan later shared how Heather promised to chase her dreams once that year was up. And when it was, she packed her bags, hugged her family goodbye, and headed south, leaving behind the familiar for a shot at something extraordinary. Heather wasn't running away. She was running toward something. She'd heard the stories of Myrtle Beach, the stages, the lights, the chance to turn her talents into a career. Her family supported her, even if it meant letting her go. She kept in touch, calling home to check in, sharing snippets of her new life. Susan held on to every word, proud but worried, like any mom would be. Heather was their star, and they believed she'd shine. But as we'll see, not everyone saw her light the same way. By the fall of 1991, Heather Stigliano had been in Myrtle Beach for about 3 months, carving out a new chapter far from the familiar hills of New Jersey and Pennsylvania. She'd landed a job waiting tables at Shoney's restaurant, a local spot where the clatter of plates and chatter of tourists filled her days. It wasn't the stage she'd dreamed of, but it paid the rent on her modest apartment near the shore, a place where she could hear the ocean at night and imagine her name in lights. She'd made friends quickly, her infectious energy drawing people in, just like it always had. But beneath the surface, things weren't as bright as they seemed. Heather's letters and calls home painted a picture of someone trying to find her footing. She'd tell her mom, Susan, about the long shifts, the salty air, the friends she'd met at work or around town. But lately, those calls carried a different tone. Hints of frustration, maybe even loneliness. She'd been in touch with Susan just a week earlier, sometime around late October or early November, admitting the entertainment world wasn't opening its doors as fast as she'd hoped. Susan urged her to keep pushing, to come visit if she needed a break. Then, after that call, the line went quiet. Days stretched into a week, and Susan's unease grew. Heather wasn't one to vanish without a word. She'd always check in, even if just to say she was okay. By November 11th, that silence had stretched too long. Heather's friends in Myrtle Beach, people she'd met at Shoney's or through her budding social circle, started to worry too. She did not show up for her shift and did not answer their calls. A couple of them decided to swing by her place. It was a Monday, the kind of crisp fall day where the beach town felt more like a ghost town than a tourist hub. They pulled up to her apartment, a squat building just off the main street. Her car wasn't in its usual spot, a 10-year-old Chevrolet she'd driven down from the Northeast. That alone was odd, but not enough to panic just yet. They knocked. Nothing. Called her name. Silence. The door wasn't locked. Maybe she'd left it that way, or maybe someone else had. They pushed it open, stepping into a space that felt wrong from the first breath. The air was stale, heavy with something they couldn't name. The living room was a mess, furniture askew, bits of broken plastic scattered like confetti. And then they saw her. Heather lying motionless on the floor of her own home. Her body was near the center of the room, partially covered by shadows, a pillow tucked beneath her head in a way that felt deliberate, almost tender. Her clothes were disheveled, her skin pale against the carpet. The sight stopped them cold. Time seemed to freeze as they processed what they'd stumbled into. Heather had been there for days, about a week, as it'd later be confirmed. The apartment, once her sanctuary, was now a crime scene frozen in time. Her friends didn't touch anything. They backed out, hearts pounding, and alerted the authorities. Myrtle Beach police arrived quickly. Inside, they found signs of a struggle, smashed pieces of an iron, a bent knife, footprints that didn't match Heather's small frame. Her TV was gone, her purse missing, her 35mm camera nowhere in sight. The discovery rocked Myrtle Beach, a town used to summer crowds, not dark headlines. Who left her there? Why the pillow? And where was her car? The moment Myrtle Beach police stepped into Heather Stigliano's apartment, they knew they weren't dealing with a simple break-in gone wrong. The scene screamed intent. Broken pieces of an iron, a bent knife, a missing TV, and that haunting detail of a pillow under her head. This was personal, deliberate, and messy. The investigation kicked off fast, with officers fanning out to chase every lead, from the people who knew Heather best to casual acquaintances. First stop, the people closest to Heather. Her friends from Shoney's restaurant, where she waited tables, were shaken but eager to help. They painted a picture of a girl who'd been upbeat at first, charming customers with her smile, but lately seemed distracted, maybe even on edge. One co-worker remembered Heather mentioning a guy who'd been hanging around the restaurant a little too often. Someone rough around the edges, not a regular. She didn't think much of it at the time, but now it stuck out. Police jotted it down, wondering if this mystery man had crossed her path outside those walls. Next, they turned to her neighbors. Most hadn't seen much. Heather kept to herself, they said. But one older woman across the hall recalled hearing a loud thump a week earlier, around November 4th. She'd brushed it off as furniture moving, but the timing lined up too perfectly to ignore. Heather's family, though miles away, became the emotional backbone of the early investigation. Susan, her mom, was on the phone with detectives daily, replaying that last call where Heather sounded homesick. She insisted Heather didn't have enemies. She was too kind, too trusting. But Susan did mention an ex-boyfriend, a military pilot from Pope Air Force Base. They'd split before she left for Myrtle Beach, and Heather had told her mom he wasn't thrilled about it. Could jealousy have followed her south? Police tracked him down fast. Turns out he was deployed in Saudi Arabia the entire week of November 4th. Airtight alibi, scratched off the list. Then came another lead from Susan, a party Heather had gone to a few weeks back. She'd gotten tipsy, passed out, and later told her mom she thought something bad happened. Maybe an assault by a guy there, an Air Force pilot married to one of the guests. Heather had been shaken, even considered reporting it. Was he covering his tracks? Police hauled this second pilot in for questioning. He admitted to being at the party but denied everything else. His fingerprints didn't match anything in the apartment, and his wife swore he'd been home that week. Another dead end. Meanwhile, the physical evidence was piling up. Those size 11 sneaker prints in the carpet? Too big for Heather's petite frame. The broken iron pieces and bent knife hinted at a fight. Someone strong, desperate. And then there was the missing car, a beat-up Chevrolet she'd driven from New Jersey. If they could find it, they might find who took it. Detectives hit the streets, asking around town. Had anyone seen Heather's car? A gas station clerk a few blocks away thought he'd spotted it late one night, driven by a scruffy guy he didn't recognize. It was a start, but not enough. Days passed, and the case risked going cold. No solid suspects, no car, just whispers and dead ends. Then, on November 14th, a break came from 400 miles away. An antique dealer in Pawleys Island, 26 miles south of Myrtle Beach, called police after seeing Heather's story on the news. A man had walked into his shop a week earlier, twitchy and pushy, trying to sell a 35mm camera matching the one missing from Heather's place. The dealer didn't buy it. Something felt off, so he wrote down the guy's license plate as he sped off. That plate? It matched Heather's stolen Chevrolet. Bingo. Police traced it to Melbourne, Florida, where local cops had just pulled over a 38-year-old drifter named James Bernard Whipple for a traffic stop. A construction worker turned drug addict. He'd been in Myrtle Beach that fall, bouncing between odd jobs. Co-workers told police he'd vanished from work around November 4th, same time Heather went quiet. But did he know her? That was the question burning through the investigation. Some of Heather's friends vaguely recalled her mentioning a guy who'd crashed on her couch once. A friend of a friend, down on his luck. Could it have been Whipple? Police pressed witnesses harder. A Shoney's regular swore he'd seen a scruffy guy matching Whipple's description chatting with Heather during a slow shift. Nothing flirty, just casual. That night, a routine traffic stop turned into the break they'd been chasing. Melbourne PD spotted a suspicious car weaving through town, ran the plates, and got a hit. It was Heather Stigliano's missing Chevrolet. The arrest was swift. Whipple didn't resist, didn't run. Maybe he knew the game was up. But who was this guy, and what drove him to snuff out a 19-year-old's dreams? Let's peel back the layers. James Bernard Whipple wasn't some mastermind criminal. He was a man unraveling, piece by piece. Born in 1953, he'd spent his life bouncing around the Southeast, a construction worker by trade, but a thief and addict by habit. His record stretched across 4 states: South Carolina, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, dotted with burglaries, grand larcenies, unauthorized car use, petty theft, even a couple DUIs with resisting arrest thrown in. Illegal substances had sunk its claws into him years back, shredding his marriage, his family, everything stable. By 1991, he was a ghost in Myrtle Beach, picking up odd jobs, crashing wherever he could. Friends, or what was left of them, said he'd hit rock bottom, desperate for cash to feed the habit that owned him. That night in Melbourne, the evidence was a neon sign pointing straight at him. Inside Heather's car, cops found her purse, a serrated steak knife with blood still clinging to it, pieces of that broken iron from her apartment, and a pair of men's athletic shoes, size 11, caked in dried blood. A search of his nearby motel room turned up more: her TV, her 35mm camera, items he'd snatched to pawn for his next fix. Whipple didn't waste time playing innocent. Once hauled into custody at Brevard County Jail, he started talking. He admitted he'd been in Heather's apartment on November 4th, 7 days before her friends found her. His story? He'd gone there looking for money, knew she was a waitress with tip cash stashed away. What happened next, he claimed, was a blur of drugs and desperation. Whipple said he'd met Heather through a mutual friend, Chris Harkins, a guy he'd worked with. Maybe she'd let him crash on her couch once, maybe she just recognized him enough to crack the door. Prosecutors believed he used that thin connection as a ruse, asked if Chris was there, got her to let him in. Once inside, things spiraled. He beat her with the iron until it shattered, stabbed her with the knife, strangled her with whatever he could grab. A lamp cord, they'd later confirm. Then he cleaned up, just enough to cover his tracks, took what he could carry, and bolted in her car. The pillow under her head? A twisted afterthought, a sign he knew her, even if only faintly. Back in Myrtle Beach, the charges hit hard and fast. Whipple was extradited from Florida and booked on a laundry list: first-degree murder, criminal sexual conduct in the first degree, armed robbery, and grand larceny of a motor vehicle. Illegal substances have turned Whipple into a predator, and Heather, young, trusting, alone, was in his path. The evidence was stacked against him: bloody shoes, her stolen car, a confession tying him to that brutal November night. But in a case this raw, justice wasn't just about catching the guy, it was about proving it, beyond doubt, and giving Heather's family some kind of closure. What unfolded over the next few years wasn't a straight line to resolution. It was a roller coaster of pleas, trials, and a sentence that shifted more than once. Let's walk through it. Whipple's legal journey started with a plea. In 1992, just months after his arrest, he pleaded guilty to first-degree murder, armed robbery, and grand larceny of a motor vehicle. It wasn't a full trial yet, more like a deal to dodge the death penalty. His lawyers pushed for life in prison, hoping to spare him the needle. The prosecution, led by solicitor Ralph Wilson, didn't fight the plea itself, but wanted the maximum punishment. They argued Whipple's actions were cold-blooded. He'd used a knife, an iron, and a lamp cord to end Heather's life, then looted her place for drug money. The judge agreed with the state's gravity. Whipple got the death penalty anyway, a sentence handed down in 1992 despite his plea. For a moment, it looked like the case was closed, but that wasn't the end. Fast forward to 1994, and Whipple's case went to a full trial, a penalty phase to decide his fate once and for all. The prosecution came out swinging. They painted Whipple as a predator who took advantage of Heather's trust to break into her apartment. They leaned hard on the forensics. Blood on his shoes matched Heather's. The serrated knife fit her wounds like a puzzle piece, and those size 11 prints stamped across her carpet sealed the deal. Their star witness? Whipple himself, via his own confession. He'd admitted to beating and stabbing her, then fleeing with her stuff. The motive was simple, but chilling: cash for his next high. They pushed for death again, arguing the crime's brutality. 40 wounds, 3 causes of death, demanded it. The defense had a tougher hill to climb. Whipple's attorneys didn't deny he'd done it. His guilty plea locked that in. But they begged for mercy. They argued he wasn't a calculating killer, just a junkie who'd lost control. They pointed to his remorse. He'd told Heather's family in court, "I deserve the punishment I get, and I'm sorry for all the pain I've caused." They even tried to poke holes in the state's case, questioning whether the sexual assault charge held up, hoping to knock down the aggravating factors that justified death row. It was a long shot, but they were fighting for his life. The jury didn't buy the defense's plea for leniency. In 1994, after hours of deliberation, they came back unanimous. Guilty on all counts: murder, armed robbery, grand larceny, and they recommended death. The judge agreed, cementing Whipple's spot on South Carolina's death row. For Heather's family, it was a bittersweet moment. Susan, her mom, later said every courtroom day felt like reliving the loss. Seeing the evidence, hearing the details, knowing her daughter's light was gone forever. Victor, her dad, clung to memories of her energy, her dreams. But the verdict didn't bring her back. They'd lost their star, and no sentence could fill that void. But the story twisted again. 7 years later, in 2001, a post-conviction relief hearing shook things up. A judge ruled the sexual assault charge, used as an aggravating factor for the death penalty, didn't hold water. The evidence was shaky, possibly overstated at trial. Whipple's death sentence was overturned, a rare win for the defense's earlier doubts. The case crawled through appeals, and by July 2003, a deal was struck. 15th Circuit Solicitor Greg Hembry agreed not to push for death again if Whipple waived parole rights. Whipple took it. Life without parole, locked away at Lieber Correctional Institution in South Carolina. Hembry later told the Myrtle Beach Sun News, "Parole was a risk I didn't want to take. For the state, it was closure. For Whipple, it was a narrow escape. He's still at Lieber, serving life, no appeals pending, no parole in sight." South Carolina's death penalty debates rumble on, but Whipple's off that radar. For Heather's family, the impact lingers. Susan's kept her daughter's memory alive, though she's stayed out of the spotlight. Victor's rarely spoken publicly since the early days. They've got justice, sure, but it's a hollow kind. Heather's absence is the real sentence they carry. What do you think? Did justice land right, or is there still a piece missing? Drop your thoughts in the comments, smash that like button if this hit you hard, and subscribe if you haven't already. We've got more cases to crack together. Stay curious, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.